and doing really well at what you're doing is an important part of it, and all that other stuff is important too. The problem is so big, I think it takes all kinds of work to dismantle it.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that lines up with something you said earlier, just the phrase like small business storytelling, which I think you guys do so well. And then what you also did with the book and like weaving the interludes throughout it, which just brings it back down and, makes it not just a big, an anti-Amazon manifesto. Just the word, I appreciate that you use the word resist, because we live in a world where it's not actually really possible to eliminate Amazon from your life. So I appreciate that. And there's an anecdote that you tell in this book about having to order books from Amazon like 2 years ago before you went, full separating from Amazon. And I don't know if we've all been there as booksellers, but I know that I have certainly been there.
Yeah, Lane is referring to it was my toddler, or my son at the time, was in the middle of what they call the 4-month sleep regression, which is the for me was the hardest part of becoming a new dad. And one of the side effects of not getting any sleep was being super forgetful and losing track of to-do lists and short-term memory. And I got an email that was like, just checking in to make sure you're all set for the author event on Friday. And I got that email on Wednesday and I hadn't ordered the books. And so like at that point, I just paid tooth and nail to get these books delivered next day on Amazon. And it was embarrassing. I like tried to hide the boxes from my employees, but they eventually figured out what was going on. We sold all the books. It would have been a profitable event had I not paid all that for next day shipping. But that was the last purchase I made on Amazon. Actually, I deleted my account the next day. Even knowing it was there, it was funny and tricky. I sometimes I forget that story is in the book, and I remember, and I just have this feeling of horror. But the resist versus boycott thing is really interesting too, because one of the things that makes Amazon impossible to fully boycott is Amazon Web Services. It's really hard to tell who uses Amazon infrastructure for hosting on the internet. In fact, I'm almost certain we're using it right now. Zoom is most likely an AWS client. Netflix is, Disney Plus, all these giant platforms that we all rely on in these times use Amazon internet infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons it's so profitable for them. It's one of the reasons why they can screw with retail pricing so much, is because they make a ton of money elsewhere. But it's also, I do like to focus not on cutting Amazon out of your life totally. I think I'm not interested. Like, people come up to me and apologize all the time for shopping on Amazon, and that's not what I want at all. I just want people to make sure they're taking care of the small businesses in their community. I think it's a much more doable thing to say, pick a restaurant, pick a shop, pick a spot to support to make sure it sticks around, because that makes a much bigger difference to them than it does to Amazon if you're not shopping at Amazon. It's a positive argument, and I think it's a lot more resonant with people, just because it is. Amazon is so big and so everywhere that it can be really overwhelming to try to totally boycott it, and much more overwhelming than simply saying, hey, if you buy a hardcover book from Polina Springs Books this week, they're going to really appreciate it. It might make a big difference for them.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. That I've often tell people, that there's room enough for Amazon to exist and for indie bookstores and other small businesses to exist. Just, be deliberate about where you're spending your money, and, don't buy everything off of Amazon. But I had not framed it before, which is kind of shocking to me, in that way that, buying a hardcover book from us can make the difference between a lost day and a day where we turn, our $1 in profit. versus when you know are avoiding Amazon, it's not going to affect them. So yeah. I have an event story where this was at Flyleaf Books in Chapel Hill when I was managing there, and I can't remember the details about how we had missed out on ordering the books, but it didn't happen. And I drove to the Barnes and Noble that was like 25 minutes away, and you know, came up to the counter with 20 books or whatever, and she was like, "Oh, what's good?" And I was like, "Oh, a book club, whatever." You know, they're the ones who, and I did not realize that I still had my Flyleaf name tag on, and the clerk saw it, and we just had like a moment of understanding, and it was just like, you know, it happens sometimes, but
yeah, that's bookseller solidarity. That's what I'm talking about.
I can reveal some insider knowledge there, because as I'm not sure everyone on this call knows, I'm a defector from behind the Iron Curtain from many years ago. My first book industry job was for Amazon back in the late 90s when it only sold books. And there were holiday seasons where there was replenishment done in Amazon warehouses from, you know, local Costco's or Barnes and Nobles when
they do it too.
Whatever the book was they wanted. So,
oh man,
yeah, managers would drive over and come back with 20. And that was, sometimes it was hot books, but then when they had begun to transition into other products, like, I don't know, Beanie Babies or whatever it is, like, we're just going to go grab some more and pay retail and then ship those out. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So see, this is something that you talk about in the book also, is that Amazon has created or really just like tapped into the instant gratification culture where, you know, when I tell all my employees always, like, if somebody asks to order a book or anytime somebody asks for a book and we don't have it, we respond with, "We're sold out, but we can get it for you in 1 to 2 days." And it's so important. I feel so anxious about our customers not knowing, like, hey, we can get it in like 1 or 2 days. It's okay. We can do that. And I, you know, just these stories that we're telling.
Yeah, it's not this free overnight shipping or free 2-day shipping thing is for most of human history would have been an impossibility, and for many people who are selling retail online, it still is an impossibility. And Amazon can only do it because they've got that fleet of the Prime vans, and they've got fulfillment centers everywhere. They're creating that expectation that that's a normal speed for things to travel, and they're the only people who can do it. It's just one of the dangers of monopoly power is that they can shift an entire culture's expectations about how fast something should arrive after you order it. And if you begin to think about the logistics and the working conditions that are required to get something to your door that fast, it's, you know, even if I had an opportunity to be able to ship things that fast, I don't think I would want to, because I don't want to create that kind of expectation on the workers who make it possible.
Yeah, not to interrupt, but one of my peeves about that is you referred to, as they do, free shipping, free next day shipping, which of course it isn't.
Right.
This has been not just their trick, but I think every huge corporation's trick is to somehow, you know, offload the costs and keep the profits. Well, first of all, people are paying whatever it is per year for a membership that allows them this free shipping, which somehow no one remembers. I don't usually, but I've thought about telling people, like, sure, I'll send it to you next day if you give me $150 right now. I'll send you anything next day you want. Like, and that the other costs of that are subsidized by society in a variety of ways. You know, like Walmart's employees who are on food stamps, and it's that same kind of concept where, oh, sure, you don't pay at point of sale, but we've, you know, that company also doesn't pay taxes, and so your tax burden is higher than it should be because of that. So that's a cost you incur, but you don't see it on your receipt from that purchase. So
yeah,
it's one of the deceptive parts.
Well, Danny, what I really I love the way that you have strike such a conversational tone in this book, but also the breadth of what you cover, everything from, you know, how important it is to support your local businesses, but also the way that Amazon treats its employees and the way it has taken over every facet of the publishing industry and the way that it has created its own fulfillment and shipping processes and everything. Are there things that you think of that you wanted to include but didn't, or think that you would ever or wish that you had included?
It's a great question. No one's asked me that yet. A big thing late in the editing of this book was where to stop. Because if you research and read and write about Amazon, there's something new every day. And so at some point I had to turn this book in. We wanted it out in March. And I'm glad it came out in March. And now I'm seeing people use it as part of their Independent Bookstore Day celebrations, which is a huge honor to me. I think springtime was a perfect time for it to come out, but that means like I had to turn it in before the election. So I really didn't know what the future of policy would look like. And as I got further into the book, I found myself focusing more and more on policy. So I decided to end it at the House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee's report. They issued a huge report at the end of last year, really important kind of indictment of Amazon and big tech's crimes and a legislative blueprint for a way forward. And it was major enough that I was like, okay, I can cut it off here and just say, hopefully at some point the government picks this up and decides to do something about it. But that I could not write about the Union Drive in Bessemer, Alabama, which was tremendously interesting, I think ultimately sad. But the lengths to which Amazon went to prevent their workers banding together to advocate for better conditions says so much about their character as a company. It was a really interesting story, and I think it has huge implications. Like what happens in terms of labor at Amazon is what happens in terms of labor everywhere. Like everybody is watching what happens with this stuff, and I don't think it's over. It was perhaps a setback for some people, but I think the labor struggle at Amazon is just beginning. And like Amazon is so successful that other companies of that size are looking to them for a blueprint. And you see places like Walmart trying to catch up to Amazon, or Barnes and Noble even. And I wish I could have gotten more into the labor, but like it happened far after I turned in the book. So I mean, I tried to treat the Amazon workers with dignity and solidarity and write about the issues they faced, but I really wish I could have gotten to the union stuff. And we needed a second printing so quickly I couldn't even there were a couple typos in there that I couldn't correct just because they had to rush it back to second printing. So I don't know, maybe we did a second edition with the zine after I got some great feedback on that first self-published edition. So maybe at some point I can go back and tweak some things and add that stuff. But yeah, great question.
Yeah, there's just so much. I don't even know. I love that you've made it such a small, accessible book too, when, you know, people have written gigantic tomes. Yeah. But this is just such a perfect way to get into this discussion.
Thanks. It's meant to be an intro. So I think I went a little bit into a ton of different things. And that's why it was so important for me to cite my sources and have a list of further reading in the back, because I encourage people to do reading. You know, a week after my book came out, Fulfillment by Alec McGillis came out. And that's an amazing counterpoint because he really does a deep dive into a lot of stuff. And it's a groundbreaking work of investigative journalism and storytelling that I think is a great next step after you read How to Resist Amazon and Why. Because he's doing a ton of research and reporting and there are a couple other heavyweight books that I would encourage people to look at. But I wanted this to be a quick and cheap intro as a conversation starter and to point people to where they can read more.
I have to admit, just having it at the front counter of the bookstore always starts conversations. It's great.
Good. That's exactly what I want.
Yeah, it will be an invaluable tool moving forward because when people ask us about Amazon, it kind of is like which aspect do you want to talk about? Because like you mentioned in the book, you know, what parts of your business does Amazon affect? And the answer is all of them.
Yep, everything.
Yeah, and this is less a question, more just an observation, but some of the examples that you cite in here about the type of company that Amazon is, like, could not be more on the nose for like an evil mega corporation, in that like they literally use Pinkertons.
Yeah, I knew this was said. Yeah,
is, you know, yeah. It just,
I think that was the last thing. That was maybe the last thing I added to the book, and we were already into copy edits, and it was too late to add anything. But I was on the phone with Microcosm. I was like, "You guys, they hired Pinkertons. We have to include this. This is too good to not." Pinkertons being the notorious union busting detectives from the first antitrust era, and like Rockefellers and all that hired these relentless spies to basically quash dissent in union formation of their companies. And like, that's the firm that Amazon hires to do the same work 100 years later. Like Lane said, it's just totally on the nose.
yeah. Do you, I guess I can just phrase this very simply. Do you feel optimistic about the, resistance against Amazon and the future of retail and small business?
I do, but I think I have to. I think it would be really hard for me to do my job if I couldn't find hope. I mean, like, hyper locally, the Raven has found a super supportive community, and like, we're doing all right. We're expanding. I think there is a path for an independent bookstore to find a community and some success. I think it's harder after the last year. The timing of the pandemic was just ruthless, because it finally felt like we were getting to some critical mass with bookstores, and there's so many new stores opening, and then just to run into this brick wall. So it remains to be seen what the industry looks like. And I think a super sobering statistic is that book sales are up, but bookstore sales are down, and that there's a lot of work to do as an industry to make sure that independent bookstores are being served and valued as a part of this whole ecosystem. That being said, I see a ton of hope from the government, actually, weirdly. One of the architects of the nascent antitrust movement is Lena Khan, who wrote a paper when she was in law school called Amazon's Antitrust Paradox, that really changed the game in terms of how people think of antitrust enforcement. And she got nominated to serve as an FTC commissioner. And that's a hugely influential and powerful position for someone like that. And that's a really powerful antitrust mind, really high up at one of the agencies that's in charge of that. And that I think that is one of a couple indications that the Biden administration is taking this more seriously than previous administrations. Like, one thing a lot of people don't know is that Jay Carney was Barack Obama's press secretary, and now he's a spokesperson for Amazon. And like, that administration was pretty cozy with big tech, and I'm seeing some encouraging breaks from that philosophy this time around. And one thing that gives me hope is that both sides really hate big tech. They hate them for different reasons, but like Republicans, big tech drives them up the wall. They think they're being censored by big tech, which I think is not true. But I think there is important momentum that we might get votes from both sides on stuff to curb the power of big tech. So I think there are some encouraging signs. And the reason I'm talking so much about the government is I think that's ultimately where it has to come from. I think a mistake that happens a lot is that this gets pinned on the individual consumer. Like, if we all stop shopping at Amazon, they'll go away. I don't think that's the right approach. In fact, I think Amazon would probably like us to say that, because it's kind of a red herring. It's not up to us. The problem with Amazon is that they've been allowed to get this big, and they've been allowed to get this big by a government who's not interested in antitrust enforcement. So it's really a government problem with a government solution, but I do think there are some encouraging signs. That being said, it's important to keep the pressure on and like have this conversation with other booksellers, have this conversation with your customers, but also have this conversation with your representatives.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's about, figuring out, and you get into this in the book, but, asking yourself what kind of world you want to live in, because Amazon does have its roots in everything. And, I feel so fortunate to be in our community where, it is so locally oriented and we have strong support. And I live 150 feet down the street from a farm stand that is open 6 months out of the year, where 95% of the stuff there comes from within sisters. Like the eggs are laid across town and stuff. And it's, I just feel super fortunate to be in that kind of environment. Ariana or James, do you have any other questions specifically about the book for Danny? I have some other questions for Danny after, but.
I think I'm good right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love talking about this and I could do it for hours, but I'll let you.
Yeah, in the interest of time,
I feel
we
like
should
I've been
probably move
pent
on.
up. Well, I'll say this is more of a comment than a question, but going to what you said earlier about, I feel like for years, 20 years, there's been this feeling of, I don't want to complain about Amazon. As I would talk about with my old boss and with other people, it's like, we're not even in the same line of work. People still think of them as this book company. It's not. That's, a sliver of an iota of concern for them. As you said, most of their money comes from things people don't even think about. The retail part is a fraction, and the book part of that is a fraction of a fraction. And I don't even want to think about them. And so I didn't want to badmouth them or even talk about them. I felt more comfortable in recent years as I think people have learned how many pies they've got their fingers in. It used to be just a bunch of grumbling booksellers. And now I think we all realize it's every aspect of our economy is affected by this. And so now it feels somehow a little easier to mention that and say, yeah, this is a bad model for us all. When, and the pandemic illustrates that even more so, that, how many $1 billion did Bezos and other, big tech people make while everyone else lost money?
Yeah.
So it feels like the right time to be a tiny bit more assertive about it than we have been.
There is actually one thing that we didn't touch on about the book that the book does touch on is the the privacy issues. And I was an ad came. I think I was watching Hulu the other night, and an ad came up for the Amazon Halo, which is something that I have not seen before. Which is, I don't know if it's a specific device or just an app that they have now, but it's a fitness. It's like a fitness tracking, and they even in the advertisement say it will we'll use your data to create a specific workout regimen for you. And I mean, if you have that and Alexa and a Ring doorbell, it's just a full, it's a full Amazon home.
Yeah. That's just, I'll just say that's really scary. And for more, read the book.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to shift gears, and this is like a personal question that I'm very interested to hear about. Is so you have two, for people who follow the Raven on social media and stuff, you have two pretty famous bookstore cats. And I'm so curious about the logistics of, I know it's iconic to have like a bookstore cat. I have 3 cats in my own personal home, and I've considered like shifting them over there, but I can't even begin to wrap my head around the logistics of it.
You probably don't want to do that. If you want a bookstore cat, I would start with a kitten, because those cats are used to peaceful at home. It can be pretty grueling, and one of the cats is in fact kind of losing patience for it. One of the design elements of the new store is that we having a back room means we can seal them in the back room if they're getting frustrated or tired of people. They live here. They've got a litter box here. I mean, we've got people in the store every day to feed them and take care of them. The logistics of the bookstore cats, it all happened with the previous owner. So I bought the cats with the store. It's a funny thing. I have a cat at home. which was, my wife was my girlfriend at the time, and I bought her a cat for Valentine's Day without realizing the long-term implications of that decision. And then now I bought 2 bookstore cats, and I was raised as a dog person, and I don't particularly even really like cats. I'll tell that as the secret on this event. And so the question of like, what would your 16-year-old self tell you if he saw you now? I think the first thing would be like, why the hell do you have 3 cats and no dogs? What's wrong with you? But yeah, it's become kind of part of the brand. I never lack for social media ideas with the cats around. They really do like the attention. So it's cool. I don't think it's for everybody. There was one author, a big author, we were very excited about. I probably shouldn't say who it was, but we were really excited for this visit. And she had a big lecture one night, and we were running an open mic the previous night. She agreed to be featured at the open mic. The open mic was at the store. The lecture was at the theater. And within like 10 seconds of her being in the store, she's like, there are cats in here. I got to go. I'm going to be at my hotel. Text me. And she like took off. She's like so severely allergic to cats. And this open mic had fallen apart before it even started. And so we had to find another venue and move everybody over there. So, I mean, I think there's an interesting question of access for people with allergies. And like, it's an interview question. Like, are you okay with cats? Are you allergic to cats? When I'm interviewing people for the job. So it brings complications, but I think ultimately it's been a win. But definitely don't convert home cats to shop cat, because cats don't adapt to that kind of change very well.
Yeah, the story about the open mic is basically like my worst nightmare.
The author was a profoundly good sport, and we have had her back a couple times since then. So like, it's all good, but it was a real panic in the moment.
Good. Yeah. We have a portrait of a cat that was before my time at the store, that was kind of a stray who hung out around the store, and on, particularly cold nights would come and hang out in the store and get locked in the store. Fred was the cat's name.
Fred. R.I.P.
Yes. And then my other question for you is, how do you guys come up with all of your like brand? So like the shirt that you have on right now is awesome. The Raven Delivers shirt is awesome. Who comes up with all of that?
That's a good question. I get really competitive. And so like, I just have this stupid thing where I really want to have the best bookstore t-shirts in the country. I don't know why. It's just like this competitive streak with me. These are our new ones. This comes out Saturday. This is our Independent Bookstore Day shirt for this year. We have an amazing designer. I used to do our merch by myself. I used to just kind of fake my way through it. But with merch, I think the best thing I can say is hire a talented designer. That's money well spent. I knew a guy who had worked with, we ran a competition. We launched a festival and hired people, did a search for people to do the logo. And he came in second place, but I really loved his work. And I knew he designed t-shirts for the record store here in town. So I just reached out to him. And with the pizza, like I was, the way I explained our model at the beginning of the pandemic was like, we're a pizza place, like carry out, delivery, no dine-in. And so I was like, could you design a shirt that looks like a pizza box? And like 2 weeks later, he came back with that, and it was brilliant. And this one, I was just like, what if you did a 90s NASCAR shirt? And this is what he came up with. So I just have the little idea. I just have a tiny 1-sentence germ of an idea, and he sends me Pinterest boards and goes wild. It's really fun to collaborate. And like, these are printed locally. He's a local designer. I think one way to support local, to like embody the buy local philosophy, is to bring other local businesses into what you do. And so like, I know a lot of stores had a ton of success with Bonfire, but I really like printing our t-shirts here, and giving that business and attention to local screen printers. So yeah, it's collaboration. It's really fun. I love doing the merch. I know like the books are the bread and butter, of course, and we really do focus on that, but it's a lot of fun to do the shirts too.
Yeah. We my like creative director, who's a very talented artist and has done a lot of great stuff for just like the feel of the store. We we were like sitting in a meeting talking about like like a shirt design for us, when I think we were like scrolling through Instagram and saw your God, that's so good. Yeah, just extremely jealous. Should we shift to talking about what we're reading and what we're excited about?
Yeah,
That
let's
sounds
talk
great.
books. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have a guest here, Jillian, who might want to share a book or two, who is our Penguin rep for Danny and I. So she knows what she's talking about.
Put it on the spot.
Yeah, put on the spot. I don't know.
Hey, that's so kind, because I'm reading one of Random House's books for my book club, and it's not even mine. You guys are such prolific readers, and it is so encouraging that you're seeing the amazing in our titles is truly the heart and the fire that keeps us going. And being able to, like, as a publisher on a personal scale, like watching the videos that you guys have been posting and seeing the empathy that has come from you supporting individuals that come into your store. Like, one of the lines that stuck with me on one of your last posts was not judging someone on their socioeconomic level of how they have to buy books, and not judging them if they use Amazon, and making it a superhuman connection, which is what I see and what I love working with you both, because you always look at the person as a human and you're like, hey, you're here in front of me. And that's, you're right, having that wee pamphlet, having the, like, as you said, like it's approachable, it's tangible, you touch it, and it's a conversation starter. And that's what you guys do every day. So if it's my book or anybody else, like, kind of like The Miracle on 52nd Street, it's our books, or if it's Macmillan or Little Brown, you guys are just rocking it out. And I couldn't be more elated this is a very long story, but I'm very grateful. If it's my books, I'll talk for the rest of the entire time, but I just should say I'm more wowed at what we're doing. And I can't say any more than that, because my books are great, but what you guys are doing in person is hitting the community in the way that we are incredibly proud to support you in. So unless there's other things, then I'll just give you a pamphlet and be like, you're in the top 10, but I'll stop talking.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jillian. It's so good to see you. Who's got a book to recommend?
Ariana?
I do. And I also just want to make sure that all of our attendees know you are welcome. This is our Bookseller happy hour time. You're welcome to turn on your cameras, and you can even talk about a book you're excited about. I think opening it up to everyone would be fun. And I guess we didn't all introduce ourselves earlier. I'm Ariana Polybagus. I'm the owner of Country Bookshelf. You've been hearing from Lane Jacobson, the owner of Paulina Springs in Sisters, Oregon, and James Crossley, the manager of Madison Books in Seattle, Washington, along with Danny Caine of Raven Bookstore, who did get an intro. But thank everyone for being here. This is one of my new favorite books. This is coming out this summer from Spiegel and Grau. It's called Fox and I by Catherine Raven. And this is memoir and nature writing. The author currently, and during the time of the book, lives actually 60 miles away from me here in Montana, and in this beautiful area just north of Yellowstone National Park. And she has her PhD in biology. She's working as a remote professor, but also teaching courses in Yellowstone. But she has created this, she's bought this little piece of land and built this tiny little cabin for herself as she's trying to figure out how she fits into the world. And this one year, this fox starts visiting her every day at the same time of day for 18 minutes on average. She's a scientist, so she's always paying attention to all these details. And the fox shows up every single day and sits there and looks at her, and she starts engaging with the fox and talking to it, showing it the feathers and rocks in her pockets. And eventually she starts reading The Little Prince to the fox. And she starts having conversations, and she's so conflicted because she's a scientist. She's not supposed to anthropomorphize animals. And so the book is this meditation on her relationship with fox, but it's also on looking at all the ways that humans are animals also, and looking at the natural world. And she engages with every part of the natural world around her, including she knows the names of all the grasses and what they like, and how this grass affects whether this animal is able to have this particular type of interaction on her land. Anyway, beautifully written debut, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Ariana. Danny, you want to share one?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the book I can't stop thinking about is Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe. Just came out 2 weeks ago. It was embargoed, so nobody got ARCs of this. So like I couldn't have told you to read it 4 months ago, except for a hunch that it was going to be really good, and it is. The Sacklers are the owners of Purdue Pharma, which is the manufacturers of OxyContin, which the invention and marketing of OxyContin was the taproot of the opioid crisis. And without the invention of OxyContin, the opioid crisis maybe wouldn't have happened, or certainly wouldn't have been as severe. The Sacklers are notoriously secretive. They wish to be known as art philanthropists and not inventors of a lethal drug. And they not only didn't collaborate on this book, they really actively tried to get it stopped for years. And the team of lawyers at Doubleday and the dogged spirit of this investigative journalist have created this immensely readable story. He pieces together the entire story of this really secretive family, and it goes way back. Arthur Sackler, the patriarch, invented the art of advertising drugs to doctors. That's not a thing that was always done, and he invented it. And you can see how that ultimately led to the overprescribing of OxyContin. So it's a gripping story. It's amazingly well researched. Patrick Radden Keefe, who wrote Say Nothing, is another amazing and gripping kind of novel of a true crime book. He's a great storyteller, and the thing that strikes me the most is actually how much the Sacklers in Purdue reminded me of Amazon in their corporate strategy. Like one thing in particular, like at every turn, Purdue Pharma will be like, we only sell 1% of the opioids in the world. They lie to deflate their own scale, which is something that Amazon does all the time. Like, how can we be a monopoly if we only have 4% of the world's retail sales? And they tweak the numbers, and then government just eats it up. So a sobering book, but a thrilling book, and a really wonderful read. Say Nothing, or no, that's a good read too. But Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe, perhaps is bound for awards attention, I would think, later this year and into next year, but definitely worth a read right now.
James?
Sure, I'll mention 2 or 3 things kind of quickly, hopefully. The first 2 of which were books that I loved from authors we did events with just recently. One of whom was Jonathan Myberg, who has a book from Random House called A Most Remarkable Creature, which is about many things, but largely about these rare predatory birds who live in deepest South America, the Falkland Islands and Tierra del Fuego, who are curious and amazingly personable birds like crows or parrots with a complicated social life. And it felt, I mean, it's not that Jonathan Myberg discovered these birds, but reading this book makes you feel like he did. Like, I've learned something new. There's this creature on the planet that's fascinating to know about, and I never heard of them before. But that's not all there is to the book. It's kind of a great travelogue and a study of natural history and how the Earth came to be the way it is today. A really compelling read. I mean, I was partway through the book and thinking, this is so much better than I thought it was. And when I saw Jonathan talk about the book, I was like, oh, this is great. I could listen to this guy for hours. Oh, wait, I'm reading his book. That's the, so I do recommend that. There's also a collection of short fiction, which happens to be sitting here next to me, called Farthest South by Ethan Rutherford. A set of, the tagline someone gave it was bedtime stories for the end of the world. These disconcerting and somewhat dark, tension-inducing stories that are just really good. Ethan also presented it really well. The framework for the book has to do with parental anxiety in specific. Like somehow the notion that as a parent, there's so much darkness in the world that you can't keep away from your kids. So you have to figure out how to expose them to that or teach them about that when your biggest urge is just to like hide it all away from them. So striking that balance between tenderness and darkness. So that was really good. And one last one that's coming out here, also sitting next to me, I think in June, from Biblioasis. I've talked about it with these guys before, so they know it. A Ghost in the Throat by an Irish writer named Doreen Negrifa, who is writing about another Irish poet of the 18th century, a woman who wrote a lament for her murdered husband. This is kind of a classic piece of Irish literature. I mean, a bloody story of just emotional pain that kids study in school and probably find boring most of the time. But as an adult poet herself, Doreen Negrifa is gripped by this and goes back to it over and over and uses it as a lens to look at her own life and her own motherhood and her own marriage. And she, like Danny, is a poet, which turns out to mean they write great prose. And so a really compelling read. Very literary, but I mean, I think somewhere I wrote about it, I said it was like holding a beating heart in your hands. So, you know, it's got brain and heart to it.
What about you, Lane?
Great. Let's see. So I've been recently trying to allow myself to just read some like older books and take the pressure off a little bit from always reading advanced reader copies and stuff. So the stuff I've been reading, not super old, but Every Tool's a Hammer by Adam Savage, who is like one half of Mythbusters. And he's like, I got into watching, he has like a YouTube channel now where he does like 1 day builds where he tries to make something in 1 day. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book Shop Class as Soulcraft, which came out a couple years ago, which I enjoyed, but it was very wordy. And it was very much like the PhD holders version of like the value of manual labor. Whereas this is kind of what I wanted that book to be. And it's part like how to and how he operates and part memoir and part just like telling these like funny stories from a career working with Industrial Light and Magic, working on Star Wars films, and then doing Mythbusters for like 14 years and all that. And super fun and just a really cool, you know, I love to pull little tidbits about like creativity from a book like this and see how I can apply it to my approach to the bookstore. And there have been like a couple of cool things in there. And then another one that I'm reading is The Three Body Problem, which I'm almost done with, by Sichen Liu, which is the first in a trilogy that is written in China and translated into English, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, 2014. Yeah. And it is a very just kind of epic in scale sci-fi in kind of in the style of like an old school sci-fi where it's much more cerebral. And I don't know where the second and third one are going to go, but this one is about, it's set against the backdrop of the Cultural Revolution in China and sort of during this era where, you know, there was a lot of tension in government and they were exploring new military tactics and stuff, and they build this base that ends up receiving a transmission from intelligent life out in space, and then different camps among the humans kind of form and how they want to approach and what unfolds with the realization of learning about intelligent life. Ariana, do you have another one?
Sure. Let's see. I have been reading only things that are not out yet because I am on an awards panel right now, and we're getting to the crunch. But one of my favorite books, which unfortunately I don't actually have a cover for, it's an very early copy, is a book of short stories called After Parties by Anthony Vyazna So, who's a Cambodian American author from California. Unfortunately, they passed away, I think in December. But this is one of the best, most amazing short story collections I've read in such a long time. It'll make you cry, but it also has incredible humor. And it's just everyday life of these Cambodian American characters. So the main character that you see throughout a lot of the stories is queer, so you get a lot of really great representation there, and him trying to, find a way to still be himself, but also not leave his family and not leave his community, and also be able to build a life for himself that makes him happy. So that's one of my other favorites right now. James, you got another for us?
Gee, I already gave you 3. It's not.
You did give us 3. All
Yeah,
right. I'm
not
pressured.
like there's ever a shortage. I don't want to hog it though. Is there anybody who wants to? Jillian's got one.
Jillian.
Okay, now I'll give you my list. Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah,
So there's a new Immortals coming in the fall, and it's totally unlike anything from Civility or from Gentleman. It is a Homer-esque. It is an Odyssey-based, set in the 1950s in the Midwest. And it's this beautiful journey about 5 people. And I love a book where I literally envision there's 5 protagonists. I didn't know what they looked like for half the book, because he describes everybody by their surroundings, by their encounters, by their misadventures. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they're white. I had no idea. And it was so funny because he just has that prolific ability to create a sprawling everything. And it literally goes, oh, he wrote these 2 lovely little books before. That's nice. So that's just going to be epic. And that is, oh gosh, so this is where I get on my tangent. I'm like, oh, what is that book called again? Like we all do. So as I'm thinking of that, we also have the new Lauren Groff, which is actually called Matrix. And it is about a legacy over a century of nuns in about the 4th century, which is not usually a thing that we talk about. And it very much is on the tales of A Book of Longing, where you had the story of Jesus' wife, that kind of setting, that kind of embodiment of a narrative history that was never told before. And the coolest thing about Lauren Groff's Matrix is that she never uses the male pronoun ever in the entire book. It is completely feminist driven, and it's very quietly done so. You don't realize until you're reading, and you're like, I have literally not seen a gentleman or had a gentleman called out, maybe through a third party. Things that are publishing soon, the Women of Lafayette, and it is the castle, the main mansion that Lafayette from Hamilton embodied, like his whole family, his legacy was there. There's 3 characters. 2 are real, and you can Google them through the entire read. 1 is made up, and you have to figure out which one it is. But as you're reading, you realize that these women changed history in ordinary ways that made extraordinary history. And it's for every reader. And luckily, it doesn't have a woman facing away on the cover. You actually get a profile, finally. But I'm in love with the history. It's one of those things that anything that's Googleable transcends storytelling. And the last one I promise I will stop bugging is The Paper Palace comes out in June and July, early July, forgive me. And it's one of those elevated velvet reads that goes, I feel like our reading has been challenged. Like we're like, okay, I want to read fast. I want to be able to consume this. And I love, Lane, that you've gone back to classics, because you're right. This is the only industry where the old stuff is better than the new stuff. So to go and read it with enjoyment. And this is one of those books, like I stopped reading for the cell. I stopped reading for the edits that need to be made in the galley. I was like, oh God, this is good. It's a woman. You enter the book. It's already started. It's begun. And I love a book that you can just get into. You don't need an intro. She's decided to have an affair with a friend that she knew from high school. And it's just deliciously raw and mature and elevated, but not in any way that you can't go right next to the chapter where she has to go back to her family's vacation home. Her mom's there, her older kids are there. And the rest of the book is about her dealing with these choices. And it's not Elena Ferrante cerebral. It's not commercial or literary. It's just holy bananas. I want to hold this book and love it. So thank you for giving me a chance to actually talk about books.
I'm all excited to read all these new books.
Amor Tolls goes to the Midwest. I'm excited for that. I feel like we'll be able to move a couple of those.
The Lincoln Highway.
One or two, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I have to say that I love the book that's just like ace the Bechdel test.
Yeah. Right.
The Matrix, like setting the bar high there. I love a book about medieval nuns. So.
Such a fun career move for Lauren Groff too. Like, how are you going to follow up? What's your next novel after Fates and Furies? About nuns in the 4th century. I love it.
Danny, do you have any more to share with us?
You know, I was going back and forth on sharing this, but I think I'm going to be talking about this book for the next 6 months until it comes out anyway. It's a little farther ahead than I would normally recommend. But Miriam Toews is one of my favorite authors. She most recently wrote Women Talking, which was a bit of a breakthrough for her, but I've been reading Miriam Toews for a long time. And her new one is called Fight Night. It's October from Bloomsbury. But this is a return to, like, people who have only read Women Talking don't know that Miriam Toews is perhaps the most hilarious novelist we have. Her novels are so zany and funny and wacky. And she has the most weird Canadian sense of humor. It's such a delight to see her wit crackle across the page. So Fight Night is 3 generations of women living in one Toronto apartment. The mother is pregnant and frequently absent, leaving the young girl and the grandmother to kind of fend for themselves. And the grandmother is completely batty, and they're all kind of like fighting in their own way. I think the best way I can to explain the humor of this book, the mom is bugging the grandma and the kid to do more household chores. And so the grandma's response to this is that she just sits on the stoop with the hose watering the flowers until she falls asleep, at which point she sprays herself in the face with the hose and wakes up and just repeats the cycle again and again until the neighborhood police drive by, at which point she tries to spray the hose into the window. And if the cops get out to talk to her and their toes cross onto their property line, she's spraying at their boots because they all hate cops. So it's very, very funny. But you can tell there's kind of darkness pulsing beneath the surface. And I am not far enough into it to know why precisely these 3 women are fighting, but I know that fighting is important to them. And I just hope it spreads the cult of Miriam Toews even further, because she deserves to be read much, much more in America than she is. So Fight Night, Miriam Toews. I'm not going to shut up about this book until it comes out in October. It's starting now.
Awesome. Well, I think we're about ready to start wrapping up. If anybody has anything that they'd like to add, or Anna James, feel free to chime in. But just a reminder that Independent Bookstore Day is this Saturday, and hopefully we will see you all either in our stores or on our websites, on our social media, whatever.
So can I cut in and ask what you guys are doing for Independent Bookstore Day?
We are, so ironically, this is the one where, like, I don't know, over the 12 years that I've been a bookseller, it's been very, you like buy some balloons and say we're doing it. And this year, I don't know, we've just been a lot more active in talking about it. But we're not doing anything creative or specific. But the swag this year is really
Come
good.
on, Lane, make the pitch. Get the people to your store. I'm
I
trying to give you a point to be a
You're
salesman.
gonna get a cat
I'm gonna
by
brainstorm.
Saturday. A kitten on Saturday, everyone.
TBD. James, what are the plans at Madison?
Well, in Seattle, we traditionally have had a really successful passport program where people travel from store to store. I think we were the first place in the country to set that up. And in 2019, the last time we could do a regular independent bookstore day, we had almost 700 people spend the entire day visiting 23 stores in like an all-day odyssey that involves ferry rides. And this is like a 10-hour deal to become a bookstore champion. But obviously with the pandemic, we didn't do it at all last year. There's kind of a curtailed version called 10-10-10, where you have 10 days to visit either in person or virtually any of the stores to make a purchase to become a champion. But we're still gonna have some activities in the store on the day. We're offering discounts for anyone who shows up in our Madison Books merch. We've got a local, a local, write that down.
Yeah, I know, I am. That's a great idea.
We launched a new, so we have t-shirts that we sell in the store, but to be able to offer more styles and sizes and colors, we have used Bonfire now to create a couple new designs that we just launched. So that was part of it. You can go online, everybody, and see those if you want. We're gonna a local baker who's gonna do a pop-up shop out front where we're gonna do a little trade too, where purchases made from her will get a store discount in the bookstore, and purchases made from us will get a free sweet treat of some kind from the bakery. So it should be fun.
Ariana, what about the Country Bookshelf?
Well, Country Bookshelves plans got a little curtailed. Our events coordinator, who would normally be kind of coordinating all this, suddenly had an emergency and is not in the office at the moment. So we are being very low key, but a purchase of $50 or more in store or online will get folks the free, the Independent Bookstore Day tote bag, which is really gorgeous this year. And of course, we've got the merch. But other than that, we've been so busy that we actually don't want to encourage more people to show up, because otherwise we're going to be at capacity all day and have to have people wait outside. And so we're hoping people will continue to shop online or to spread out their love for us over several days so that we don't have to make people wait outside. It's been snowing off and on here in Montana still, so that's not always the most fun. But I also wanted to take a moment to let everyone know that one of the other ways that you can resist Amazon is by resisting the constant appeals from authors to pre-order their books on Amazon. And authors will tell you that that's the only way that they get credit for it, or that that's important. And, unfortunately it is important for them, but they can get credit for your pre-order through your independent bookstore. And so we've put the bookshop links for all the books that have been talked about tonight into the chat. And it doesn't matter if it's coming out in September. If there is a listing for the book, your independent bookstore can order it for you. So, but Lane, I really love the idea about having people get a discount for wearing your store merch into the store. If so, some of our attendees tonight some of my customers who are here at the event tonight, I happen to know, are always sporting their Country Bookshelf sweatshirts when they come into the store or when they show up for book club on Zoom. And so you know who you are, and you always make my heart sing.
Danny, what are you all
wants to say hi.
Who's this?
This is Nayo. She's been bugging me all night. She's like, "You're sitting down. Why can I not sit on your lap?" The Raven is having a sidewalk sale, which is our first in-person activity since March 2020. So we have piles of hardcovers and paperbacks everywhere that we're going to put out front. We have the new merch. We are teaming up with a local butcher to sell hot dogs and brats, and our friends across the street at the Ladybird Diner are going to sell pie by the slice. yeah, we have all the merch. I think that's about it. But the sidewalk sale is going to be huge. Oh, we have our prize wheel, which has been dormant for 18 months, but we have like a spin the wheel, so you can get a sticker or a button or something. We used to bring it out every Independent Bookstore Day and Small Business Saturday, but it's been retired for so long, it will make its long-awaited return. And I'm pretty sure we're going to do like 10% off if you show up in a Raven t-shirt. I really like that idea too. Yeah, thanks for that, James.
If anyone shows up in a Madison Books t-shirt, give them like 25%.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, it's been so great seeing everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is really fun. I mean, just on a, like, it's great to talk about the book, but it's also just really good to hang out with friends for the night. It's so good to see you all.
Yeah, you too. It's the thing that every time I've been down this past pandemic year about stuff, there's been some kind of call like this with a bunch of people in the book industry. I go, oh yeah, this is why I'm still doing it. So thanks for lifting me up yet again, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, super great to see everybody, and looking forward to Independent Bookstore Day and Independent Bookstore Days in the future, when we can throw big parties and do everything that we love to do. Right. And I guess should also add, we do have, this is part of our like Books in Common Northwest event series. And if you go to, I'll drop it into the chat, booksincommonnw.com. We do have a bunch more events coming up, and you can check out a full events calendar there. We have a poetry panel coming up later this month for National Poetry Month that we're very excited about. And there's other stuff on there as well for y'all to check out. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, Danny, for joining us. And best of luck, everybody, and happy Independent Bookstore Day.